Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data. So, sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. I still run into vendor teams that collect vendor banking information on voided checks or letterhead, like that's a requirement. Is that still a best practice? And if not, what else should be done? Keep listening. Welcome to episode 327. Do you need to collect a voided check or banking on letterhead with vendor banking? Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick answer, and it's no. But don't stop listening. Here are three reasons why, and I'm sure there are more, why you should not collect it and what you should do instead. So the first reason is that the voided check and the banking on letterhead can be forged. But not only that, fraudsters no longer need to go through the hassle of printing them and making sure the paperweight or the format of the print version is correct, because both of those documents can be sent electronically. So it's easier than ever to take a screenshot of a check with the free snipping tool from Microsoft. Paste it in the free version of PowerPoint or Google Sheets or, a similar program. Then draw a white box over the routing number, account number, name, and bank branch address logo. Draw a text box and place it over the routing number and enter whatever routing number the fraudster wants to use. Then repeat 3 more times for the account number, name, and bank branch information. They can also use a freehand tool to write void on the check. Then save it as a PDF, not editable, of course, and then send it to you and your team so you can say that you collected a voided check or the banking information on letterhead. And all that I just talked about, I am sure with all these AI tools out here now that it is much easier than those 7 steps to collect it and then 1 step to send it to you. I'm sure it takes less than that. Because that's with non-AI, non-tech way of doing it. Many of you are going 8 steps. That would have only taken me, I don't know how many steps, or a fraudster less steps, and I wouldn't have started, or they may not even start with a screenshot of the check, right? So it really doesn't matter because those 8 steps, even if they did them all, takes less than 10 minutes. So the point is there. And again, same with banking on vendor letterhead or on the bank letterhead as well. All right. And then the next thing is the voided check and the banking on letterhead, that can all be outdated. How many of you know that you received W-9s and other documentation from points of contact that have held that information or those same forms and have been giving it out for years and years. So it could be just outdated. Banks merge, they get acquired all the time. Vendors merge and they get acquired and they move too. So depending on your vendor mix, you could have vendors that don't even use checks for that matter. They just keep them around in case buyers like you ask for them, and that way they've checked the box. Then when you do, guess what? They have that handy check to send you so they can again check that requirement off the list. Only guess what? That check is old. Their bank was acquired, and while the account number and branch address stayed the same, the routing number changed. But the vendor didn't read that notification that far down and just kept the checks. Great. Now they're giving it to you. And again, same with banking letterhead, only worse. Someone may have had to go to the bank and get that letter and will keep it until global warming reverses, which how long will that be? Through bank acquisitions, through branch moves, and maybe even their own move. Now, the next one is because vendors don't buy checks or their own letterhead to put their banking on. Again, depending on the type of vendors you have. And actually, I've seen this same issue where for payroll, the HR team or whoever does the payroll team will require a check, a voided check to get payroll set up. Shoot, half of these employees may not even have checks. But again, depending on the type of vendors you have, many of those vendor types may not have checks or their own letterhead to put their banking on. They probably didn't request their banking on letterhead from the bank yet, and would need to go into the bank branch to request it. Or you know what? They could save themselves all that time and just like the fraudsters, they could just forge it. How are you and your team members supposed to know the difference? And so that's what happened when I was at a virtual accounts payable group meeting I attended last year. We were discussing fraud, and an attendee was being helpful in sharing a fraudulent bank letterhead with vendor banking that they recently received. So the goal was for the group, right, to be helpful, was to show where the document could be forged by highlighting that information. Well, guess what? Almost every typed word on that document was highlighted. But another example is when a client who requested a check or banking on letterhead for all vendor types. Now, one vendor type, however, were those that had memberships. And so they were regular people, just like, right, your employees for payroll. They were regular people, not vendors in business trying to sell you something. And their biggest complaint was that the members said they don't have checks. I will tell you now, I do not buy checks from the bank anymore. I don't issue checks. I don't want to have little paper things that I can send out that has all my banking information on it. It's funny that we try to protect our banking information until checks come around, and we send those in the mail, which we know if the fraudsters don't get it, then the internal employees at the post office will pull it or will get it. And we send those with no problem at all. However, we would never give anyone our banking information if they ask. But you know what? We'll send them a check. But anyway, um, so that's another reason. And so those are the three reasons, right? The voided check, banking on letterhead can be forged. The voided check and banking on letterhead can be outdated. And then the vendors don't buy checks or their own letterhead just to put their banking on it. So the question now is, well, what should you do? And my response is to make sure you collect the right information on the right form. So create your own company branded ACH wire form and request at least the following information on that form because you want to avoid fraud. Ask for the payee registration number, whether it's their TIN or VAT, and then use that information to compare to other documents received for new vendors or for existing vendor compared to the information that is already in your vendor master file. That is a form of authentication. Also ask for the remittance address with the country included, because you want to use that information again to compare to other documents received for if you have new vendors, for existing them, for the information in the vendor master file if you have an existing vendor. And then you're also going to require the address and country for the bank that the vendor is giving you, so that you can use that as a red flag. Because guess what? If you have a different bank that you're sending money to versus, or in a country that's different from the country that the vendor is located in, then that could be a red flag for fraud. Also, contact information, right? Remittance email address. Sometimes you only get the person that you're dealing with, their remittance or their email address, which is fine. But the remittance information or remittance email address that you send the remittance information to can save your accounts payable team a phone call later on asking what the payment covered, what invoices it included. Also, collect the banking. Now, if it's a new vendor, ask for the new banking. If it's the old vendor, an existing vendor, ask for not just the new banking, but also the existing banking too, because you want to compare that with what's already in your vendor master file as authenticating data. And then I already talked about asking for the country when you ask for the new vendor or new banking or existing banking information, because you want to make sure you're sending the payments to a country that is the same country as the vendor. Could be okay, but it's definitely a red flag. And then I always ask for the internal employee that they have a relationship with, because now you've got someone to reach out to if there are red flags, or there's some suspicions that you may have. And yes, they could just go get an employee that's on LinkedIn, but you know what, they don't really know if you are going to contact that employee or not. And so asking all this information on a separate form could be the deterrence that you need that fraudster to have, so that they abandon the request and just go on to the next potential client or victim, I should say, that is not asking all those questions. So each of these pieces of data, again, is a deterrent for an actual fraudster, but it can be a first step to ensuring that you are paying the right vendor with validation that the payment will be successful. Now, you can continue to collect a voided check or banking on letterhead, but only in addition to your form, company branded ACH wire form, or vendor banking form is what I call it. You can collect it in addition to that, but don't make it in lieu of your own company branded ACH or wire form. All right, so I hope that was helpful for you, especially those of you that want to eliminate that extra step of collecting the banking on checks or vendor letterhead, especially if you're having trouble getting them. This might be a great time or a great reasoning that you can use for leadership or whoever you need to work with to eliminate that from your process, and then add in your process the recommendation for a vendor form and the information that you need to collect. All right. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 327th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.